Turn around, maybe one day you're all that was there.
Welcome to the latest Jon Krawczynski Show, also known as the You Betcha basketball show for those of us who like to poke fun at Minnesotans. I mean, I've only been here 28 years. I'm not a Minnesotan.
You are not one of us.
I think...
How dare you?
So 28 years. What do I need, another 30?
At least,
yeah.
I would say. But I mean, even then, even when you get that, you didn't come into this world in 60 below weather like I did. You didn't, you don't have that hardiness, that kind of down-to-earth, blue-collar mentality in your blood. I mean, it's just none of that is there. You can't fake that. And you certainly don't have the accent.
I'm trying to think of something you just said that I could deny or fight with you on.
If you can't pick up this accent in 28 years, man, you are definitely not one of us.
You got me. Well, actually, I got the vaccine. So
yeah, right.
As soon as I got here, I got the vaccine, and they said, you will not have a problem with the accent. Let's get to basketball. Thanks to TSR Injury Law, 612-TSR Time, sotastick.com, sotastick.com, and Tony Hoaglund, your State Farm agent in Champlin. Tell you more about our sponsors later. Thanks to them for sponsoring the program. As we try to expand the network and popularize our shows even more, we're talking to some national advertisers. It's a very interesting inner podcast world type thing. The people now that podcasts are becoming a bigger deal, advertisers are looking for downloads, which is not something I never separated downloads versus listens. So if you have the option of downloading or just clicking on a link and listening, for the sake of the network, please download. It seems to matter to our advertisers. So if you could do that for us, we'd appreciate it. Thanks again. So we are watching fascinating playoffs. Is there anything you're seeing in these playoffs that inform our view of the current Timberwolves?
Well, there was a good question kind of that was given to me on Twitter about kind of watching the Warriors and the Rockets, and Adam Rowan is the guy to give him credit for asking, does kind of the Rockets theory of ISO heavy basketball, the way it seems to have somewhat slowed down and neutralized the Warriors a little bit, does it validate the approach that Tibbs was taking with the Timberwolves about this? And I think there's something to be said there. I know it's fashionable, and I know everyone has to say that Tibbs is the worst and he doesn't know what he's doing and he needs to be fired immediately. But when you look at how the Rockets have really sort of grinded the pace down and limited the Warriors' possessions, limited their shot attempts, limited their passing, it is giving Golden State problems. And now, I think clearly with Jimmy Butler and Andrew Wiggins and even Jeff Teague and kind of the way that we would see the Timberwolves offense really slow down, especially in crunch time, you'd get frustrated sometimes watching it. And you'd be like, gosh, this is hard to watch. It's kind of predictable. What's going on here? And what we are seeing, at least with Golden State, is that it's a fly in the ointment here. And so one of the keys to this kind of approach being really successful is you have to have just elite ISO players. I mean, Chris Paul, James Harden, those guys, the way that they can break down a defense and, hunt the mismatches and exploit them is as good as anybody in the league. So you got to be that way. You also got to be really good defensively, which the Rockets are and the Wolves are not. So there's clearly a big gap, but you can see a little bit of, okay, now there's the method to the madness a little bit with the offensive approach that the Wolves have had or had during the regular season and even in the playoffs.
By the way, we did our last show on kind of the Karl Anthony Towns rumors and, scuttlebutt about the way things are going internally. I tell you what, everywhere I go that I run into somebody who has some insights into the organization, they tell me it's just like Thibodeau walks through the the offices and people just dive under their desks.
Yeah,
it's amazing. And we're not going to go too deep into the stuff because we covered it so well last time, but I don't know that I've ever been around a team that won as much as last year's team did that had this much trouble, except unless you want to go back to like the Chili Favre 2009-2010 Vikings, where we all knew that wasn't built to last. The difference here is they're trying to build something to last. That was just like, let's take our shot.
Yeah, that's the thing that brings this all up and makes it so unique is if you just look at the basketballreference.com page of the Timberwolves and their franchise history, and then you see what they accomplished on the court this season, their statistics, the record, to get into the playoffs, all those things, you think, holy cow, this is great. This is a team on the rise. This is finally putting all of the misery behind them. And in Tibbs' favor, that 18 sellouts. So fans did get behind them. Even if some of them were biting their fingernails and pulling their hair out, they were there watching. TV ratings were up. So the success of the franchise and the success of the team is really encouraging. But then, knowing kind of some of the environment behind the scenes, you wonder, like those Chili years, you wonder how sustainable it was. And clearly, I think in those Chili years with Favre, it was very much all our chips are in the middle of the table. We're going for the Super Bowl this year and next year. And if it doesn't work out, we'll deal with the consequences later. I think
we also knew that Chili and Favre really didn't like each other going in.
That's right. Yeah. So there was all of that. This time around, there is the Wolves can't have all their chips in the table just yet because their young guys aren't quite in their primes, and you don't want all your chips in the table when the Warriors are where they are and the Rockets are where they are. So they need to be built to really in the next 3 to 5 years kind of start to take the leap, and really in the next 2 with Jimmy Butler, you want to take that leap and you want to get into it. Now, one thing, a similarity between the Vikings and Wolves, and this is just with my experiences, I'm in the same, like both Childress and Tibbs to me are not bad human beings in terms of not like the sadistic prison warden is what I say. They're not like the black hat jerk coaches that are just completely unreasonable and all those things. They are just control freaks, and they want it. They have unbelievable confidence in their systems to get their team and their players where they need to go, and there isn't a lot of flexibility / communication within that. But if you talk to people behind the scenes with both, but I think even especially with the Wolves, like I don't think that anybody really tells you, God, Tibbs is just a bad guy. Like he shouldn't be here. Like Rick Brunson was a bad guy, right? Like, but Tibbs is not a bad guy, and so it's a different kind of discontent. It's a frustration with the rigidity of things and with maybe the lack of communication, which is the same with Chili. I found him to be entertaining, and I found him to be, you could talk to him and I think he at least would understand where you were coming from, even if he didn't agree with you. And he still went back and just did it his way. And I think that's the same thing with Tibbs here.
That's a really good comparison. And I actually ended up liking Brad Childress toward the end. He came in.
Me too.
He came in thinking he had to be a jerk.
Yes.
And he was for about a year and a half. And then he kind of realized, well, if I act like a jerk, people are going to call me a jerk. It's not a good strategy.
That's right. Yeah.
And he became much more human, much more personable. The one thing I will say is I've talked to some people, some prominent players who played for him. I think some of them liked him, but quarterbacks ended up hating him.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks hated him because he wanted to predetermine everything they did. And if you're a good quarterback, you want the freedom to think for yourself.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's kind of similar with Tibbs. I mean, he calls a lot of the plays in the half-court offense. He really, wants precision that way. There's not a lot of freedom of thought, and just he doesn't say just go out and play. Just play, move the ball, get it going. And part of that, I think, was especially last year, not this year as much, was that with such a young team, he was really trying to guide them and really trying to kind of get them in what he thought was the right way to go. But yeah, I think that's, that is some of that frustration. And then it comes to, okay, why do you want me to do this? Tell me why. Like, let's have a conversation about it. And I think that sometimes is where, things have fallen short and where frustrations start to creep in.
Thanks to TSR Injury Law. We've told you about TSR before. You see the billboards. We actually know them as actual human beings. We've done shows at their offices. We've seen their mock draft room. Mock draft. Boy, I can't get out of the sports world. Stick to sports, John. It's their mock trial room. It's an impressive place. And they will go anywhere to see you. If you call them, you will speak with a lawyer. You can call anytime. You can go to their website, tsrinjurylaw.com, and email for a free consultation. You don't pay them unless they win your case. They handle car accidents, truck accidents, motorcycle accidents, bicycle accidents, drunk driving, injury lawyers, wrongful death, workman's compensation, dog biting cases, child and daycare injuries, neck, back, spine injuries, defective products, food poisoning, ankle, foot injuries, brain injury, ear injury, eye injury, facet joint injury, knee injury, leg and hip injury, and everything else. So nobody wants to have to make that call, but if you do have to make that call, you want people who will really help you. 612-TSR time.
This is Steve Terry for TSR Injury Law. If you've been injured in a crash, it's TSR time. If insurance companies treated folks fairly, we wouldn't have a job. Well, I've never been busier. Call today for a free consultation at 612-TSR-TIME. That's 612-TSR time.
So the NFL has botched its handling of the anthem protest once again.
Shockingly.
That's what they do. And the NBA, the interesting thing about the NBA is much more socially conscious, much more evolved. They talk about social issues all the time. They take difficult stands all the time, and yet their players stand for the anthem.
Yeah, and I think that it's the NFL fallout has been a case study in really political discourse in this country, because what you see a lot, Steve Kerr was very critical of it, there's been a lot of talk kind of back and forth about how this is implemented and the choices that the NFL made and what they did. And a lot of the NFL defenders, including some in the media and things like that, say, well, but the NFL version of this rule is not as strict as even the NBA's version. So what about this? What about that? And it's just ridiculous because, first of all, the NBA rule was kind of instituted a long, long time before any of this came up. It wasn't reactionary. I mean, I know there was the Chris Jackson kind of stuff and that fallout, and what happened to him during that time was certainly something to kind of a black eye on the league, I think. But one is that the owners and the players' union had these discussions and ultimately came to an agreement themselves, or an accord that said, okay, we're comfortable with this, with this language, and so it wasn't as unilateral as the NFL owners' move was. Two is, as Steve Kerr said, the one of the reasons that the players stand for the anthem and haven't done major demonstrations that way is because they believe, and there's a trust in Adam Silver and the leadership in the NBA that they have their best interests at heart, that they are allowed to speak their minds, to wear I Can't Breathe t-shirts during pregame warmups, to do other things, to write on their sneakers with messages, to do other things that allow them to, what they feel is, address their issues even more directly and more effectively than kneeling during the anthem, which I think LeBron and some of